I stood frozen outside the office door of my bakery, barely breathing as I listened to the voices inside. "She's too stupid to realize what's going on," my husband James sneered, his voice filled with smug confidence. "Meredith doesn't even read the documents she signs. She's too busy baking cupcakes to know I'm moving money around. She'll be out, and no one will blame us when the business fails." My heart pounded as I clutched my mouth to stifle a gasp. Every word felt like a knife. They weren't just betraying me, they were laughing about it. This wasn't just a plan to steal the bakery. It was a plan to erase me. My name is Meredith Wilson. I'm 47 years old, and I thought I was the proud owner of Sweet Dreams Bakery, until I overheard my husband plotting to destroy everything I built. Stay with me to see how I turned their betrayal into their undoing, and built something even sweeter. I met James when I was 25, working part-time at a diner in Minneapolis while finishing my culinary certification. He was charming, confident, and full of big ideas. We fell fast and hard. When we got married, we didn't have much, but we dreamed together. Kids, a cozy house, and maybe, one day, a small business we could call our own. That dream started to take shape after our daughter, Veronica, was born. I had always loved baking. My grandmother taught me how to make pies and cakes from scratch when I was just a kid. To help cover Veronica's braces, I began selling cupcakes at the local farmers market. They were a hit. James saw the potential before I did. When a tiny storefront opened up downtown, he encouraged me to take the leap. "You've got real talent, Mare," he said. "Best cupcakes in Minnesota." I used a small inheritance from my grandmother and our modest savings to open Sweet Dreams Bakery. That first year was tough, but we got by. I framed the first dollar I ever earned and hung it behind the counter. That little piece of paper meant everything to me. Business was steady, and when one of my seasonal pumpkin maple cupcakes got featured in a local magazine, things exploded. Lines out the door. We expanded, hired staff, and even upgraded our kitchen equipment. That's when James suggested he take over the financial side of things. "You focus on what you love," he told me. I baked, he balanced books, and for a while, it worked. Then, his brother Thomas started appearing more often. At first, it was casual, stopping by for a cupcake or chatting with James over coffee, but soon, he was taking James out for drinks, having long, hushed conversations in the back office, and making suggestions about the business. I didn't think much of it at the time. I was too busy with catering orders and new recipe development. I chalked it up to James just needing another guy to talk business with. I trusted him. Looking back, there were signs I missed. Strange charges on the business credit card. Bars believe in electronics. High-end purchases that didn't fit. When I asked James, he brushed it off as expensive for a potential expansion or new marketing strategies. There was also the time he rushed me through signing refinancing paperwork, saying we had to lock in the rate before it changed. He'd even joked that I was too sweet to be skeptical. Even Veronica, now studying business at the University of Oregon, had noticed something. During our last phone call, she said, "Mom, Dad asked me weird questions about the bakery's ownership. Is he thinking of opening his own shop?" I laughed it off, but her words echoed now. It wasn't curiosity. It was strategy. For nearly 15 years, Sweet Dreams had been my life, my pride. I poured my soul into every pastry, every cookie. I had no idea that while I was dreaming, the people closest to me were plotting to take it all away. But I wasn't the naive baker they thought I was. They had underestimated me, and that mistake would cost them everything. A week after overhearing James and Thomas through that office door, I made an appointment with our longtime accountant, Beverly. She'd handled our taxes since the beginning. David didn't ring Beverly. Back when Sweet Dreams was just a weekend farmers market project. I hadn't seen her much lately because James had recently suggested we change accountants to modernize the business. Now I understood why. When I arrived at her office, Beverly's face turned serious the moment she saw me. "I'm glad you came in, Meredith. I've been trying to reach you directly," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. "Is something wrong?" I asked, though my gut already knew the answer. Beverly turned her computer screen toward me. "There are significant discrepancies in your accounts, large withdrawals and transfers to an LLC I don't recognize, and this loan," she pointed to a document. uses your bakery as collateral, but the amount is nearly triple its appraised value. My stomach dropped as the numbers swam in front of my eyes. Hundreds of thousands of dollars had disappeared over months. When she asked who had access to the business accounts, I answered quietly, "Just me and James." She slid more papers across the desk, records of irregularities going back nearly 2 years. The Shell LLC receiving funds was registered under a name I didn't recognize, but with a mailing address linked to Thomas. The fraudulent loan I'd signed wasn't a simple refinance. It was structured to collapse the moment a clause was triggered. I sat back in the chair, trying to breathe. James hadn't just started this betrayal. He'd been laying the groundwork for years. The man I had trusted with my business, my marriage, my life, had methodically undermined me at every turn. He wasn't just planning to steal sweet dreams. He had created the mechanism to make it look like I'd lost it through mismanagement. Beverly reached into a drawer and handed me a business card. "This is Gregory Palmer. He's a financial attorney and forensic expert. He works with victims of white-collar crimes and corporate fraud. You need to call him today." Numb, I took the card, studying the embossed letters as if they held the solution to everything. On the drive home, grief turned into a focused, icy fury. I thought of the paperwork James had pressured me to sign, the smirk Thomas always wore, the smug confidence I had overheard behind that office door. They thought they were clever. They thought I was soft, blind, and easily manipulated. They didn't realize that I wasn't just a baker. I was a woman who had built a business from scratch, and I was about to fight like hell to keep it. That evening, I dialed the number on the card and scheduled a meeting with Gregory Palmer. The moment his assistant confirmed the appointment, I knew there was no going back. This was war, and I was finally ready for it. Gregory Palmer's office was sleek and quiet, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in my life. He had reviewed the documents Beverly forwarded and sat across from me, hands folded, eyes steady. "Based on what I've seen, your husband and his brother are orchestrating a deliberate collapse," he said. "The loan they convinced you to sign is structured with multiple triggers, any one of which could lead to foreclosure. The LLC receiving funds? It's likely their shell company. If your business defaults, they could buy it at a fraction of its value and claim it was all just bad luck." I sat in stunned silence. Then I asked, "Can we stop them?" "Yes, but we need evidence," Gregory replied. "We can't just accuse them. We need undeniable proof of intent to defraud." That's when he introduced me to Diana Winters, a private investigator with sharp eyes and an even sharper reputation. "Men like your husband always think they're the smartest ones in the room," she said. "We're going to let them believe that just long enough to hang themselves." Our plan was simple. I would continue playing the oblivious wife, while Diana posed as a potential investor. She'd approached James and Thomas under the pretense of being interested in their new venture. Meanwhile, I would secure my legal and financial foundation. We got to work immediately. I opened new accounts under my name only. Gregory helped me create inventory lists and photograph every piece of equipment I had purchased. We pooled utility bills, property tax records, and every receipt from the early days of Sweet Dreams. If it ever went to court, no one would question that I was the true owner. One evening while James was out, I entered his home office, a space I'd never been particularly interested in before. It took over an hour of searching, but tucked deep in a drawer beneath piles of insurance forms, I found a hidden post office. Inside were copies of the loan documents, internal planning memos, and a chillingly polished business proposal for something called Wilson Brothers Bakery. The proposal outlined everything: same location, similar branding, my staff, my vendor, all listed. It was clear they planned to erase me completely and step into the shell of what I had built. And then I found something worse. Folded neatly in the back of the folder was the life insurance policy. On me. Taken out just 3 months ago. The beneficiary? James. My breath caught in my throat. I sat down hard on the edge of his desk, heart racing. This wasn't just betrayal. It might be something far more sinister. I called Gregory immediately. "This changes the stakes," he said, his tone grave. "We accelerate everything. And, Meredith, you need to be careful. From here on out, we assume they're capable of anything." I nodded, clutching the phone. Whatever illusion of safety I'd clung to was gone, but so was my fear. They weren't going to get away with it. Not now. The moment Diana informed me that James and Thomas had bribed a health inspector to sabotage my bakery, I knew the betrayal was moving into dangerous territory. Robert Jenkins, a cousin of Thomas's wife, was scheduled to inspect Sweet Dreams in just 2 days. Diana had surveillance footage of him being handed an envelope outside a diner. "He's going to file a fraudulent shutdown report," she warned. "They want to ruin your reputation before forcing the default." I couldn't let that happen. Then came another blow. Veronica called from Oregon, her voice tight with worry. "Mom, Dad just asked me to sign some documents he's overnighting. Something about protecting the family business and needing my name since I'm a beneficiary." I could hear the unease in her tone. "What did you tell him?" I asked, barely managing to keep my voice calm. "I said I'd look at it but wouldn't sign anything without understanding it." Relief rushed through me. "Good," I said. "Don't sign. Don't even open the envelope. I'll explain everything soon." "Mom, you sound scared. What's going on?" "They're trying to take the bakery, honey. It's complicated, but I'm handling it. I'm coming home. Focus on school. I've got help. Just trust me." After we hung up, I stared at the framed first dollar I'd ever earned, hanging behind the counter. They weren't just trying to steal my business. I called Lynette, a real estate agent I trusted. If I wanted to sell my bakery quietly, what would it take? She reviewed my location, reputation, and financials, and her answer stunned me. "Meredith, this place could sell for close to $1,200,000, 0 cents, with the right buyer. I already have someone in mind, Helen Bryant, from Heavenly Bites. She's looking to expand." Helen. My fiercest competitor, but also the most respected bakery owner in the city. Her 3 locations were thriving, and she treated her team with the same love I gave mine. If anyone would protect my staff and preserve what I'd built, it was her. By that weekend, we were sitting in Gregory's office with signed NDAs and a preliminary offer. Helen offered full market value, a small premium for an expedited deal, and royalties if she used my signature recipes. "I've admired Sweet Dreams for years, Meredith," she said. "If I can help carry your legacy forward, I'd be honored." As the documents were drawn up, Diana continued gathering evidence. She had audio of Thomas bragging about using Jenkins to nuke the bakery's health score, and another clip of James describing the default trigger as flipping a switch. But they weren't the only ones making moves. We finalized the terms with Helen on a Thursday. The health inspector was due Friday. James planned to push the loan default the following Monday. Timing was everything. Gregory coordinated with the bank to delay any account freezes, citing a pending business transition. I sent a text to James that night. "The bakeries had some financial oddities. I'm talking to the bank to sort it out." His reply came within minutes. "I'll handle it. Just focus on baking, okay?" I almost laughed. He still thought I was clueless. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was 5 steps ahead. They were trying to collapse my bakery, but by the time they moved, it would already be sold. To someone they never expected, and not a single penny of that sale would be theirs. On the morning James and Thomas thought they would seize everything, I arrived at Sweet Dreams earlier than usual. The fall sun hadn't even risen fully, but my heart was already pounding. This wasn't just another workday. This was the day I ended their scheme. Helen's operations manager arrived first, clipboard in hand, smiling as we walked through the bakery one last time together. "This place has soul," she said quietly. "We'll take good care of it." I nodded, clutching the thick folder of finalized sale documents Gregory had prepared. Everything was ready, The escrow was complete, the funds were secure, and Diana was stationed nearby with our legal surveillance. At 8:57 a.m., right on cue, Thomas walked in, smug and confident in his gray blazer. He carried a leather briefcase and wore that irritating smirk I'd grown to hate. "Meredith," he said, feigning surprise. "Didn't expect you in so early." "I always show up early on important days," I replied coolly. He raised an eyebrow. "Is James here yet?" "He's on his way," I said, then gestured toward the bakery kitchen. "Would you like a cupcake while you wait?" He declined, settling into a chair with crossed legs and a cocky air. 10 minutes later, James arrived, wearing a crisp navy suit, clearly expecting some kind of celebratory event. A man followed behind him, someone I didn't recognize. Genus. "Meredith?" James said, forced cheer in his voice. "You remember Arthur Wilson? He's our legal consultant. He's just here to oversee a few things." I smiled. "Of course, and I'd like you both to meet Helen Bryant." Helen stepped forward confidently. Her presence was commanding, poised, and clearly in control. "What is she doing here?" James asked, voice tightening. "She's buying Sweet Dreams," I said. "In fact, the deal was finalized yesterday. The funds are in escrow. The bakery now belongs to her." James blinked rapidly. Thomas's smirk vanished. "That's not possible," Thomas said, voice rising. "You don't have the authority." "Actually," Gregory interrupted as he entered from the office, "she does. We have full documentation proving Meredith's sole ownership. Every signature, every loan agreement, and every tax filing confirms it." Diana entered behind him, holding up a flash drive. "And we also have recordings. Lots of them." She handed the flash drive to Gregory, who plugged it into a nearby laptop. The room filled with the sound of James's own voice. "She doesn't even read the documents she signs." Thomas, laughing. "She's so focused on cupcakes, she won't see this coming." Then came a clip of Robert Jenkins, the crooked inspector, saying, "Once the report's filed, the health department will shut her down fast." As if summoned by name, Jenkins himself walked through the front door, holding a clipboard. He stopped cold when he saw the room: Helen, Gregory, Diana, and 2 uniformed security guards Helen had hired. "You must be Robert Jenkins," Diana said smoothly. "Perhaps you'd like to explain why you plan to falsify a health report." Jenkins's face turned pale. He glanced at Thomas, then the guards, then turned and walked out the door without a word. James snapped, "This is illegal. You have no right to record me." "Actually," Diana replied, "Illinois is a 2-party consent state. But you voluntarily disclosed this information to someone you believed was a potential investor. That makes it admissible." James lunged toward Diana, but the guards quickly intercepted him, holding him back with firm hands. "Don't make this worse for yourself," Gregory said. "The evidence has already been submitted to the appropriate legal channels. What we're doing here is a courtesy." I stepped forward then, looking James dead in the eye. "You lost it," I said. "Sweet Dreams is gone. You don't own it. You never did. The money from the sale is protected and out of reach. And just so you know..." I pulled out a sealed envelope and handed it to him. "That's a notice. I've filed for divorce." He stared at it like it burned. Thomas looked as if he might throw up. Gregory added, "You'll both be contacted shortly regarding charges of conspiracy to commit financial fraud, attempted coercion, and potential embezzlement. Your bank activity is already under investigation." Helen leaned in and smiled at me. "Let's finish the walk." We stepped into the kitchen, and I could still hear James shouting something behind us. But I didn't care. Sweet Dreams was no longer my burden, and the men who tried to steal it now had nothing left to take. The fallout came faster than anyone expected. Within 48 hours of the confrontation at Sweet Dreams, Diana had delivered all the gathered evidence: audio recordings, forged loan documents, the fraudulent health inspection scheme, to the district attorney's office. Gregory personally escorted her, ensuring every file was formally logged. Law enforcement moved swiftly. Both James and Thomas were served with court summonses, and their personal and business assets were frozen pending the investigation. James, once so smug and sure of himself, was blindsided. He tried to act surprised, even claimed that he'd been manipulated by Thomas, but the evidence told another story. His own words, on tape, detailing how he and his brother planned to rob me blind. He had no chance of spinning it. Thomas didn't fare much better. When investigators uncovered his role in blackmailing James with years of embezzlement records from his insurance firm, it was clear the two weren't partners in crime. They were liabilities to each other. The brothers turned on one another immediately. Thomas testified first, trading information for a reduced sentence. He admitted that he'd gathered dirt on James for years, emails, expense reports, and even intercepted communications between James and clients. He painted James as the mastermind, but also claimed he had tried to stop the fraud before it went too far. It was a weak defense, and no one bought it. James, desperate and cornered, accused Thomas of orchestrating the entire collapse, and threatened to expose his prior tax evasion if he didn't stay silent. Neither of them realized how futile their backstabbing had become. The court had everything it needed. Meanwhile, Gregory and I attended a private civil hearing regarding the divorce and financial separation. I presented the documentation showing the legitimate sale of Sweet Dreams and my sole ownership of the bakery. The judge reviewed everything carefully and delivered a firm ruling. James had no entitlement to the profits. In fact, the court declared that his attempted fraud void any marital claim he may have had. The $1,200,000, 0 cents from the sale, remained entirely mine. When James tried to object, his own attorney, court appointed now that his accounts were frozen, refused to argue. He knew better than to challenge ironclad evidence. As part of the ruling, James was ordered to pay legal fees and restitution to the state for his insurance embezzlement. The humiliation on his face was matched only by the panic on Thomas's when the judge announced that he, too, would be facing criminal charges for conspiracy and blackmail. Facing lengthy trials and certain convictions, both men eventually accepted plea deals. James received a 3-year sentence in state prison, with an additional 5 years of probation. His license to work in financial services was permanently revoked. Thomas, who cooperated with authorities but still bore substantial responsibility, was sentenced to 18 months in a minimum security facility. Their reputations crumbled. James's name was scrubbed from professional registries, and clients he'd once served sued him for losses. Thomas's involvement in the failed scheme went public, and his family, once his biggest supporters, cut ties out of shame. They weren't just disgraced, they were ruined. I, on the other hand, walked away free. With the funds from the sale secured and my legal slate clean, I was no longer tethered to men who saw me as naive. I wasn't just a baker with a dream anymore. I was a businesswoman who'd faced betrayal head-on and come out on top. I'd been underestimated, mocked, and manipulated. But in the end, it was their arrogance that brought them down, and it was my quiet strength that carried me through. 6 months after I sold Sweet Dreams, I found myself standing in front of a charming storefront in Eugene, Oregon, just a few blocks from the University of Oregon campus. The sign painter was putting the finishing touches on the window. Meredith's Kitchen, Bakery, and Cooking School. The elegant script gleamed in the afternoon light, and for the first time in a long while, I felt truly at peace. This wasn't just a new chapter, it was a complete reinvention. Inside, the space smelled faintly of cinnamon and vanilla. The countertops gleamed, the ovens were brand new, and a chalkboard wall listed that day's baking class, Grandma's Apple Pie 101. I designed this place not to build an empire, but to share what I loved most: family recipes, warmth, community. This wasn't about expansion or scaling up, it was about connection. Veronica had helped pick out the location. When I told her I was moving closer, she cried happy tears. Now, we shared weekly lunches, and she often dropped by to help with classes or just grab a warm muffin before heading to class. She called Meredith's Kitchen the coziest place in town, and watching her thrive while I rebuilt my life felt like the greatest reward of all. I offered workshops not just in baking, but also in business basics, especially for women looking to start something of their own. From inventory tracking to how to spot financial red flags, I poured everything I'd learned into helping others avoid the trap I'd fallen into. Gregory even guest lectured once on financial self-defense. Some of my students were stay-at-home moms, some were college students, and others were women in midlife, just like I'd once been, eager to do something meaningful but unsure where to begin. One afternoon, I noticed a familiar name on the registration list for my upcoming class. Meredith Wilson, James's sister. I braced myself, unsure what to expect, but when she arrived, she pulled me aside and said, "I know what my brother did. I'm ashamed of him. But I've always rose of him." We hugged, and for the first time, I felt closure. That chapter was over. Each day in my new bakery brought something joyful. A little girl learning to make cookies for the first time. A retired teacher baking cinnamon rolls to surprise her grandchildren. And me, standing at the center of it all, not as a woman scorned, but as a woman transformed. James once said I was too stupid to understand business, but Meredith's kitchen proved otherwise. I hadn't just started over. I had created something richer, something more grounded in love, truth, and independence. Here in this sunlit kitchen, surrounded by laughter, flour dust, and the quiet strength of hard-won freedom, I finally knew exactly who I was. And I would never let anyone make me doubt that again. The morning sun filtered gently through the kitchen window, casting a golden glow over the polished counters of Meredith's kitchen. Meredith stood at the island, icing a fresh batch of vanilla cupcakes with a swirl of her signature maple buttercream. Outside, the sleepy hum of Eugene waking up blended with the soft indie playlist she always played to start the day. The scent of cinnamon and sugar filled the air, wrapping around her like a warm embrace. As she set the finished tray on the display rack, she paused to sip her coffee and gaze out the window. Students jogged past, a mother walked her child to school, and across the street, a young couple pointed to the bakery's sign, smiling. It was a quiet morning, the kind that made her feel deeply, solidly content. Not flashy, not triumphant, just right. A year ago, she had been fighting for everything. Her business, her future, her very sense of self. She'd walked through betrayal, through lies, through heartbreak. And now she stood in a space built by her own hands, on her own terms. James thought she wouldn't notice. He thought she was too naive, too soft, too distracted. But Meredith had noticed. She had risen. She had rebuilt. And as she looked at her cupcakes, her kitchen, her life, she smiled and whispered to herself, "This is the sweetest chapter yet."